Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Today, the third time he's been on our program, one of our favorite guests, Michael Johns. Michael is the co-founder of the Tea Party movement here in the United States. He's also a former speechwriter for President Bush, a political analyst, and has done extensive work with the Heritage Foundation, the Christian Science Monitor, Wall Street Journal, etc. More with Michael Johns right here on The Right Side with Doug Billings. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Another big day for us here on the show. We have Michael Johns with us again. He's become one of our favorite guests on the show. Michael Johns is, of course, as you know, the co-founder of the Tea Party movement. He has been a healthcare executive in former lives, a former White House speechwriter, and a Heritage Foundation policy analyst. Michael appears regularly as a commentator on various podcast shows and platforms. Michael, thank you, my friend, for being with us again today.
Thank you, sir. We're critical juncture here, aren't we?
Boy, oh boy, Michael, we cannot understate how critical this is for our country. We are in the 7-day period of time here before the presidential election. So much going on. It's been 2020 has been a year to remember for sure. But this, with everything that's going on, from Amy Coney Barrett to the presidential election to the Biden scandal, wow, so much there going on, right?
Well, and it's a defining moment, meaning anyone who says they know for sure what the outcome of this presidential election is probably employed by one of the campaigns.
Yeah, right.
One of the talking points is always to say we're winning, everything's great, enthusiasm's fantastic. I will say in the case of Trump, the big noticeable difference is two facts. One is that Trump's working harder for the job. So if you look at the campaign process as an interview process, basically with the American voters, yesterday Trump 3 campaign stops in Pennsylvania. Today, back out in the upper Midwest, multiple campaign stops. Last weekend he woke up, cast his ballot in Palm Beach, flew to North Carolina, did a rally, flew to Ohio, did a rally, flew to Wisconsin, did a rally. Turnout, enthusiasm, massive. And then you compare it with Biden, who literally yesterday did essentially nothing. I think he stepped out and made a statement, but there's no energy. He can't draw a crowd, so he blames it all on the pandemic as to why he's not traveling. But people really they're not inspired by anything he has to say. They've seen enough of him over 47 years. And really, I don't think there is a pro-Biden constituency out there that he's able to tap into. We've got pro-Trump constituencies, and then there's this, I think, a smaller anti-Trump constituency. I don't understand entirely the motivations behind that force, but that does exist. Right. And in essence, this vote is going to come down to a referendum on this president, and hopefully what we will be able to talk about it, because deeply engaged, is the fact that this guy has done an extraordinary job over the last 4 years against immensely difficult circumstances.
He has faced opposition from the moment he came down the escalator. It's no secret. We're not the first people to say it. And during this campaign, Biden putting a lid on it, working part-time, turning presidential campaigning into a part-time job. Of course, he's got the media, to pick up the slack. The media is in all reality, they are the ones that are campaigning for Joe Biden. And so much so do they go to the level whereas last night CNN, MSNBC didn't even broadcast the swearing-in ceremony of Amy Coney Barrett. So, they're suppressing everything about Trump, every message, every win, they suppress it. And Biden, I think, just thinks that he can sit on the couch at home in the basement and let his TV commercials and the media do the work for him.
Well, he's raised, an extraordinary amount of money, including a lot of money from Wall Street, a lot of Goldman Sachs money in that campaign. We were always blamed as being the party of Wall Street. Wall Street is behind Biden, and they're behind Biden not because of the domestic economy, but because of globalism and the fact that so many of these companies are wired into offshoring jobs and into these these managed decline scenarios, which is a definitional term that hopefully American people are starting to understand. It's driven our policy with China and other major trading partners, part of offloading manufacturing. This is not a vision that offers much of anything to the United States of America that Biden's offering. So he says repeatedly that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Well, the Trump tax cuts were predominantly focused on middle income workers. The lower 50% of the country doesn't pay taxes, right, federal taxes. So you can't cut tax on them except with the payroll tax cut, which he also has suspended. But he did focus very heavily on those lower brackets. So right, basically starting like roughly $11,000 a year, if you were employed, even in a part-time capacity, you experience tax relief from President Trump. And when Biden repeals those taxes, they're going up. So all this rhetoric that he has of "I'm going to make the rich pay for it" is a time-worn liberal cliche. It never works out that way. Working men and women are going to pay more taxes on Biden's watch. 47 years, just finally 47 years, this guy has been in the swamp. And I think literally if you asked him, what is what's your staple signature accomplishment? There's not really anything to boast to write home about. I mean, the biggest piece of legislation that he did co-sponsor was the crime bill of the 90s, which put about a third of African-American men between 18 and 35 in jail or on parole, devastated families, right, devastated urban communities, created a whole ripple effect through the economy that we're still paying the price for.
Record numbers of Hispanic and Latino voters are migrating towards Trump as well, clearly because I think a large segment of that demographic has family or comes from socialist countries, and they've escaped it. They know what it is, and they're going, "Oh, heck no," to that, right?
Yeah, a lot of Venezuelans, a lot of Cubans, a lot of Nicaraguans in the United States that are some of the most vocal anti-communists around. And if you've lived and experienced that, you certainly are not predisposed toward looking toward that. And many of them have emerged to warn Americans that some of the telltale signs of socialism's rise or its ascent starts with the things that we're experiencing right now. It starts with, beginning to ostracize certain viewpoints, determine some viewpoints as acceptable and some others, stifle freedom of speech, create an aura of political correctness, attack the history of a country because you undermine the foundation of it. Yep. Having visited many countries that either were in a process of a revolution or were launching a counter-revolution in some cases during the Cold War, I mean, I've seen a lot of this, and this is exactly how it all starts. So it's not an overstatement, as it had maybe been historically in our country, to say that, is this a plausible outcome for the United States? Yes, it's a plausible outcome that the most active political movement at this moment is engaged in working relentlessly toward. The American people can stop them. They got to stand up and they got to be, diligent and insistent upon it.
Well, you're right. And so this is what, and one of the things we really need to talk about is that, since, and especially with the Amy Coney Barrett swearing in ceremony yesterday, as I call them, the New Democratic Socialist Communist Party. I don't even view them as an American political party anymore, Michael. That might sound radical, but
I've heard that exact. A lot of people are saying that they got to be rebranded.
Yeah. I mean,
party of JFK.
They can't. Yeah, the JFK, the party of Kennedy is gone. It just doesn't exist.
It's not a decade ago now. They'd be in the streets protesting JFK's. JFK cut taxes, cut the capital gains rate, was very anti-communist in Cuba, obviously, in this crisis. Had a completely different agenda than these guys do.
And it dawned on me last night. I'm watching the Amy Coney Barrett swearing in ceremony at the White House. A beautiful setting, by the way. They had the White House really, really set up quite beautifully. And
busy for Trump.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yep.
And 3 events in Pennsylvania and back to the White House for the swearing in.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. The guy is working his ass off. He is. It's incredible. And it dawns on me, of course, now the left, their heads are exploding on cue. But seriously, I mean, we cannot take the threat of AOC and the squad and the radical left of this new Democratic Socialist Communist Party for granted. They are literally saying, all right, we're going to change the entire judiciary. We're going to pack the court. We're going to change the setup. We're going to do away with it, whatever. They are not, this is not rhetoric for them. This is what they believe, and this is what they want. And we need to begin to say this out loud and draw attention to this.
No, I mean, Biden was asked very pointedly by media, one of the few times they've asked him any uncomfortable question in this entire campaign, whether he intended to pack the court, which, by the way, itself is not the best phrase. That doesn't mean pack the court with people who subscribe to your ideology. That means expand the court, because there's no constitutional requirement or limit that it be simply 9 justices as it is currently. It'd be 90 justices.
Sure.
And I asked, by the way, I mean, do you know what the requirements are to be on the Supreme Court? Most Americans don't, I've noticed.
Well, I know that you don't have to be a judge.
Something question, and not a slight to you if you don't know. There are no requirements.
There are none, yeah.
Literally. Yeah, so everyone would say, well, you got to at least be an attorney or a judge, right? No, you have to have no legal requirement is necessary. And then you go on and say, well, there's got to be an age requirement, right? You can't put a 16-year-old kid on there. Nope, you can't. No age requirement. And then finally, I had been wrongly under the illusion that there was a citizenship requirement, but there's no citizenship requirement.
Oh my!
So you want to put illegal alien, because I kind of see where this is going, and I'm foretelling it right now before I hear it from their side, that you're going to see BLM and other organizations arise and say the courts are discriminatory because they're not, because their vision on the world is not appropriately represented. Well, the vision of the court is not designed to be an ideological vision. It's designed to be competent, legally trained individuals who can interpret the rule of law. That's it. So all these questions of Barrett that were designed to extract from her policy views on climate change or all these extraneous issues are irrelevant. That is not the functional role of a jurist in this country. It is to look at the arguments of plaintiffs, look at the arguments of the defendants, actions of the U.S. government, actions of those who have complaints against the U.S. government, line them up against the rule of law, either the statute or the Constitution, and to intelligently assess whether they adhere to the intent of that body of words. It's we make it more complicated. It is not designed to make social policy. It's not even designed to determine what's right and wrong. Right?
Yep. Right. So, what about the so one of the Achilles heels, and it might really be the only one, really, I guess, is the COVID, the pandemic. Let me preface this by saying my mother is in a memory care unit and was diagnosed with COVID. So she's in the hospital now. She's asymptomatic, thank God. So I have personal experience with how COVID can hit people. But I still believe that we need to be saying out loud, Michael, as a party and as a group of people, to combat what we see in the left. New cases is not a bad thing. We always see in the news is new cases, new cases, new cases.
To that point.
And it's not bad. We need new cases, and with an infection to mortality ratio of 0.0000, that's 4 zeros and a 3. That's the infection to mortality ratio. And I can tell you, and you worked in healthcare. I came from healthcare. The 210 or so thousand people, no, they didn't die from COVID. They had multiple pre-existing medical conditions. And the last time the CDC published something on this, you all know the story, about 6% died when COVID was the primary cause. So that's an Achilles heel for our side needs to talk about.
This president has had the back of working men and women in this country from day one. Yeah. And I am hoping that and I think is going to be the case, those people are going to turn out. I see 3 forces motivating the electorate right now that all, I think, are detrimental to Biden's candidacies. Number one is Biden corruption. All right.
Yep.
Thankfully, this laptop emerged, or who knows, because we don't have a very deeply inquisitive media, but that's emerged. And in fact, I was just this morning last night looking at some of these issues on his reported income versus the discrepancy of his assets, where he has income reported over 3 years of over, I think, $16 million, and he's declaring assets in the like 1 to 3 million range. Well, that's interesting. Where's this other 12 million bucks or 11 million bucks at? I don't think they thought through the disclosure on that. And but again, we don't have the media asking the question. I think, not to belabor the corruption issue, but if the roles were reversed, I will tell you what will be going on. If this were Ivanka or Jared Kushner, this would be a full stop moment in American politics. It would be an absolute requirement that the president come forward and have a full disclosure of every dime of money that is poured into any member of his extended family, and that we understand completely the terms of those relationships. No one is calling for that from Biden, and that is exactly what's needed right now. No voter, regardless of their ideology, their party affiliation, no voter should have to show up at a polling place with questions in their mind about whether this candidate is compromised with the two biggest nemesis we face in the world, China and Russia. And certainly if you look at the Senate Homeland, it was a joint committee report between Homeland Security and Finance, Ron Johnson and Charles Grassley, great report, necessary reading. These are not theories. This is not a hypothesis. This was a detailed, exhaustive Senate study that unveiled, millions upon millions of dollars that came in from China precisely after a visit by Biden, where he had gone over there and had asked them to back off of the South China Sea and some of the things. They didn't, as usual, he failed completely in his diplomatic mission, but his family members came back with a boatload of cash. And then on Russia, $3.5 million for the mayor's wife. I mean, is anyone even explaining what that $3.5 million was for? But actually, it's turned out to be a small fraction of what looks like an 8-figure sum that the extended Biden family has taken. But just not even any terms. No one's asking what's that for. These are factors. These are major issues as it relates to a candidate who is not even a political consideration. It's a national security issue.
Apparently, Rudy Giuliani has, he's got all these emails and he's uncovering, boatloads of stuff. But I read that Zuckerberg is now involved, that he and Biden and China were working on business deals over in China. The web gets bigger, the well gets deeper. Biden is the king of corruption of the swamp. I mean, it's infuriating, and the media, gone silent. They're radio silent on all of this.
Well, that's what we say. What's he done over the last 47 years? You'd say, well, nothing, maybe this crime bill, but what he has clearly proven successful in is maintaining positional authority, even getting higher authority, and enriching his family in extensive ways. And by the way, this is not speculation. Hunter Biden was asked, do you think this money would have flown into your accounts if your last name wasn't Biden? And he even acknowledged it.
He acknowledged it was because of his name.
So let's just understand what that means, okay? Because this is not an issue like when you're the son or daughter of a vice president that you're entitled to foreign riches. Those foreign riches are designed to corrupt and alter the policy course of the individual involved. It now appears that this wasn't even just enriching his family, but that he was deeply engaged in this. And by the way, which means he lied to the American people. That's abundantly clear that he lied to the American people. They didn't know anything about it. He didn't, Burisma, he didn't know how to spell it. He doesn't know any of this stuff. He knew every one of these details and suggested evidence that, that might have even been inspired by him. So my point is, why are we having to sit around? Why is any voter having to sit around and guess about what he has done and what we don't know about? Because we do know the media is not uncovering it. So this is what I believe American people need to be calling for: immediate press conference, next 24 hours, full disclosure of every dime that you or any of your family, extended family, have received from foreign sources, and the terms of those relationships, and what, if any, work was done. So what, if any, work was done for the $3.5 million from the wife of the mayor of Moscow?
Right. Yeah. We need to see it.
We're supposed to say we don't know. It just looks fishy. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not the way democracy is supposed to function.
Yep. Right. Well, and I think, you know, our time's almost up, but to end on a positive note, to your earlier point with regards to the enthusiasm that we see around the country, clearly the enthusiasm is on Trump's side, the huge rallies that he has. I mean, even, you know, streets lined for city blocks to greet the guy when he comes to town. Biden can't get 25 cars to show up. I just have to have hope that what we're going to see is an America that is capable of critical thought and will say, look, there's two choices here. One is the anarchy and the arson that we saw all summer long and all year in 2020, and not one Democrat condemned it. And by the way, it happens in Democratic cities. And we have Trump. Now, I might not like Trump's tweets and I might not like his personality, but by God, if he wins, he's gone in 4 years. The anarchy, if they win, it's going to be with us for decades. And I just hope that America sees that.
Yeah, I was going to go through. I totally agree with you. I think the three factors that I see driving the electorate. I mean, the first, as I said, is this Biden corruption. So this idea that they've poured tens upon tens of millions of dollars into trying to, in their campaign expenditures, present Joe Biden as just Joe from Scranton.
Yeah.
Joe left Scranton 70 years ago. 70 years ago. I think 1953. Okay, this guy's been out there for a long time. He's not Joe from Scranton. He's Joe, the swamp creature, who's been enriching his family in selling basically access and influence to some of the greatest nemesis that we have in national security. That's first. Right. Second is China, which we've been talking about.
Right.
It is clear to me, unfortunately, politically, that this coronavirus and the management of it is an issue of great concern and consideration, as you would expect, of the American voter. Well, two things here. Number one is Trump did not create the virus. All right. This virus emerged in Wuhan, China. They did everything they could to cover up that fact. They disappeared, took off the streets. We don't even know the whereabouts of the individuals who tried to blow the whistle on what they were doing. They still haven't been accounted for. They destroyed lab samples that would have been helpful for the development of testing kits. They shut down the clinics that were beginning to do the sequencing. They sent flawed PPE around the world, 85, 90% flawed. And they refused to allow the World Health Organization or the CDC in. Now, Trump tried to get the CDC into China January 3, okay? That long before there was even one fatality in the United States, he was on top of this. He put the travel ban in place, as you and I have talked about previously. That is one of the most vital presidential decisions made in modern times. And Biden called it xenophobic. He never retracted that statement, nor do we even know if Biden were in the Oval Office when he would have put that in place. I'm also on the issue of, if the pandemic and management of it is a critical issue in your judgment as you place your vote, you have to go back and look at the comment of Biden's chief of staff as it relates to the management of swine flu, where he said it was at the day that Biden made every mistake possible, and that it was strictly fortuitous, that this wasn't one of the great calamities in the history of public health. So there's no evidence of this guy's nor is there anything, and he keeps talking about his plan. His plan is nothing. There is no innovative thought.
Well, he's plagiarized Trump's plan.
He has. I mean, so, all of these things that are in there are either issues that already are being put in place. It looks like the vaccine is going to be developed in record time. Vaccines typically take a decade to develop by the time you get through the development and phase trials. He's going to have this developed in like roughly a year or 18 months at record speed in the history of vaccinations. All of the mobilization, I don't think one American in this country has died, or trust me, we would know their names by now with all the media bias and the Biden campaign rhetoric, for lack of federal attention on this issue. So it is true, whether it's 220,000 or whether it's a fraction of that, Americans have died from this. It's going to come to an end. This president stopped the bleeding with the travel ban. He mobilized major health resources across this country, including, you remember the whole ventilator issue.
Right.
Not one American died for lack of a ventilator. Not one American died for accident. We had to mobilize military health assets because Cuomo was saying we're not going to have enough hospital space. That was wrong. These Democrat governors who allowed infected individuals into long-term care facilities that had help, that had individuals that were not infected, that was the one notable mistake in the management of this. And those were Democrat governors in New York and Jersey predominantly. And then the third factor, so I think simply on the basis of the management of the pandemic alone, both on the historical record and the forward-looking vision, President Trump is best positioned on this. And then when you look at the third factor that you mentioned, the street riots, when this emerged, a lot of Americans saw the thing, the George Floyd incident, and those of us, I think who looked at it objectively said, well, yeah, it's a Democrat mayor and a Democrat city council that managed that police force. Yeah. And that particular police maneuver was entirely legally permissible under the Democrat mayor's guidelines for law enforcement. So, this guy's trial hasn't come up yet, but I guarantee you when it does, that's going to be like exhibit A for the defense, is that the tactic he used was entirely permissible. It was not out. And they've changed that now. But there was a Democrat mayor, and then this thing was co-opted. Let's just be honest. It was about George Floyd for about 2 minutes, and then it quickly became a Marxist-led anarchist rebellion that has taken over 12 lives, okay, that were, like, we don't know their names, we know George Floyd, but those 12 lives matter, and has cost American cities over $1 billion in residential and commercial property damage. Right. Now, this president did everything he could to try to get these Democrat mayors to crack down. He didn't have the statutory or legal authority to intervene because of the federalist nature of this country. But you cannot endorse that party, Democrats, who allowed this violence that literally took lives and extraordinary damage to be rewarded politically because they allowed this to play out. Absolutely unacceptable. Those forces to drive Americans en masse in support of Trump, who I think is going to have an exceptional second term without the impediments that he had in the first one, and accomplish some really great things for this country.
Couldn't agree more with you. I think they've driven most all critical thinking, logical, and intellectually mature people to the Republican Party and Trump. I think he's going, again, the eternal optimist, I think Trump's going to win. And I think, Michael, we may just be surprised. States like California may go, provided there's no massive fraud. That's always the asterisk. But I think California, and I just can't imagine rational people, no matter how much they hate Trump, in states like Oregon and Washington, and Minnesota, where the rioting was so intense. Chicago is a war zone. We'll see. We will see. But I remain hopeful and optimistic of the American people's ability to filter through all of that and make the proper decision between the two choices.
Yeah, don't commit suicide because maybe you had a personal issue with the president. He's not a professional politician. It's come across maybe at times. I think when I look at this anti-Trump sentiment and you really drill down on it, it's like, did he not do enough for the economy? Did he not? He protected Medicare and Social Security while Biden has been saying it's got to be cut. He kept us out of foreign wars. He's got troops out of these 19-year-long conflicts. He's begun to take border security seriously. None of that stuff is going to receive any attention in the Biden-Harris administration. Right. They're going to decimate jobs, decimate wages, empower China, and essentially put us back on a road to stagnation and unremarkable, track record.
You bet. Well, listen, Michael, I appreciate your time as always. It really is an honor, and it's always great to have you on the show. You're a friend of the show, and I'm glad to have had the opportunity to get to meet you and to have you on. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Johns.
Appreciate all you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I interrupted you. I just want to say to everybody out there, we appreciate it. You're a big deal in all of this, and we appreciate your opinion.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Johns with us today. We appreciate his time on The Right Side with Doug Billings. Please remember to subscribe to us. We are on all of the major podcast platforms in the country. You can see the video versions of these over on YouTube or Facebook. Please search us out, subscribe to us, give us a watch, drop a few comments, and keep in touch. We'll see you again right here on the right side with Doug Billings. Cheers.